So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihalcea, and today we're joined by Mark Lawrance, Director of Pressac. Thank you for being here.
Not a problem. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what Pressac does?
Yeah, so Pressac is a very long-standing UK-based business. We've been on the go since the early 1950s, so over 70 years pedigree. And at the moment, the business is focused on sort of two key areas, one of which, or the primary part of which, is the design, manufacture, and provision of IoT devices and various sensor technology as part of an intelligent workplace ecosystem to allow people obviously to generate telemetry to sort of get actionable insights into an intelligent building or a smart building place. So yeah, everything we do is design and manufactured in the UK, and we provide to clients and partners all over the world to allow them to generate the sort of building data and telemetry data, manufacturing data that they need to
Yeah,
power their systems.
right. That's fascinating. And what inspired you to create Pressac? Was there a specific moment or experience that sparked this journey?
So I think there was an opportunity quite a few years ago to get involved in the sensor market. There was a relationship and there was conversations going on with an individual that had a lot of IP in sensor tech, which Pressac acquired, and since then they brought their expertise and their engineering capability, mechanical and electrical engineering capability to the fore, and sort of took the basic sort of premise of what the sensors were capable of and developed them and continue to develop them to maintain sort of a cutting edge uh,
Right.
sensing capability.
Okay. And what was your background before starting this venture?
So me personally, I've been with Pressac nearly 3 years. My background's actually more on the software side. So I've done quite a wide range of things, but mostly solution engineering, software engineering for large corporates, enterprise type organizations looking to deliver workplace experience and make use of smart technology. I've operated in healthcare. I've done telco. I've been a police officer. I've done all sorts of different things in the past. But obviously, the focus at the moment is on positioning Pressac as a technology partner for companies who need that component of the intelligent building ecosystem and to sort of deliver the solutions to the end client.
Right, right. So let's go back to when you first started. What major challenges or gaps did you see in the market that made you think this needs to be solved?
So obviously, the fundamental premise of what we do is is a very small component. So it's a very thin layer, obviously, of an intelligent building or an
Yep.
intelligent workplace. And it's the foundation of what everything's built on. And it's that the fuel that drives the whole solution offering, in that it's the generation of data. We play a very small part of that. We underpin the strategies, regardless of what system a client may have or what solution offering somebody may provide, whether it's a software platform, whether it's consultancy experience, whether it's sort of strategic thinking. It all requires data. So you need to know
Yeah.
what's going on. You need to be able to measure activities and sort of operations in order to understand whether it's operating efficiently, whether there's areas for improvement, whether there's to help with issue identification, condition monitoring, all those great things. So we focus very heavily on that part of it. So we don't try and do software. We don't try and do the consultancy interpretation. We don't do the installation. We focus on providing the devices that generate the telemetry,
Right.
and it's that focus and that sort of staying in the lanes, as it were, that we stick to. That means we play very nicely with pretty much everyone else in the marketplace. But yeah, it's that high quality real time data to allow people then to turn that into information and sort of insights that make sense for them.
Right. So I have a curiosity by then. So could you explain how telemetry and IoT solutions work together to help businesses understand their energy consumption patterns?
Yeah, so obviously in order to understand your energy consumption and determine whether it's appropriate or not, whether there's areas for efficiency or not, whether there's additional insights you can get from it or not, the first thing is to understand what's going on. So there's a very well-known sort of analogy called the OODA loop, which is obviously observe, orient, decide, and act. But the first thing it starts with understanding what's going on. So if you can measure normal operation of devices and plant and equipment that obviously makes use of energy or uses energy, then you can observe what's going on. People know how much energy they use because every month they get a bill, and the bill obviously quotes or cites a volume of power, volume of energy that has been used throughout that previous period. And that's the first level of understanding. So you can see typically, how much power has been used because the meter says. Now, whether you've got main income meters, whether you've got sub meters, obviously you've got a layer of understanding. And that is useful to a point in that it obviously allows you to compare and contrast at a very top level. Where we see the need for IoT devices, specifically obviously measure energy consumption, is where people need to get more granular than that. They need to go to sort of peel back the layers of the onion to a greater level, understand in a more detailed way what's using that energy and when.
Right.
If you deploy technology in a considered appropriate way, what you can do is you can go from seeing or understanding the energy consumption maybe at a building level or a department level or a zone level or a floor or a manufacturing floor level, and you can get right down to which piece of equipment is using energy, when it's using it, and how much it's using. Now, that is useful if you're able to make or sort of derive value from that information. There is a temptation possibly in some areas where you can be overwhelmed with information or you can be given too much information, and the temptation is obviously to throw information at something and then hope people can understand and interpret it. Whereas if you do it in a I guess a properly considered way, what you can do is you can enhance the data value that you get from the different systems. So the machine reporting, the main incoming meters, the use of IoT, you can bring it all together, and then you can get a very clear picture of what's being used, when it's being used, and ultimately then why it's being used. That level of understanding then allows you to make decisions. It allows you to develop a strategy. It allows you to justify whether you're operating in an efficient way. It allows people to support rent charges, operational charges, carbon output, footprint monitoring, all those kind of things. Once you've got the information, you can then make that decision. You can act upon it.
Yeah. Right. And in your opinion, what are the most common challenges business face when trying to optimize their renewable energy usage?
The main challenge, I think, is accepting that initial investment is necessary. Obviously, there's a number of parts to that. There's energy monitoring, there's the renewable energy monitoring. So there is obviously a big drive for people to start using renewable energy sources, which aren't necessarily as cheap as non-renewable energy sources. But ultimately, the best value energy is the one that is necessary to be used. There's no point using energy, obviously, if you don't need to. So people acknowledge and recognize that something is needed to be done. And it's, I guess the first step is to carry out an audit, maybe to bring a consultant in to carry out an audit and to review at a very top level the actions and activities that are going on, and to make and to submit a report off the back of that. Now, at the moment, there isn't a huge amount of consequence if you do that well or badly, or if you don't act on it at all. So people need to be seen to be acting in an environmentally friendly way, and obviously they need to show that they are supporting green initiatives and green activities. But there's a difference between showing you're acting in that way by carrying out an audit and assessment and publishing the findings, and then actually implementing a strategy and developing a strategy that takes advantage of that and then goes on to deliver additional efficiencies. Obviously, there's a lot of legislation coming out across Europe and North America that is driving companies towards doing that. But as we saw with GDPR, until you have to companies probably aren't going to the level that they should do in order to really
Yeah.
capitalize on the benefits.
Yeah, right. Right. And for example, what was the breaking point here that made you decide to tackle this problem?
I think it probably because we can. We've got the ability to generate data that can be used, obviously, to support those kind of initiatives, energy reduction initiatives, carbon counting initiatives.
Yeah.
We 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 applied that methodology in our own factory. So we've got obviously a factory in the Midlands in Nottingham, and we put our own technology into our own business, and we saw that they were able to, to realize efficiencies and realize savings. We also work with a number of very forward-thinking end clients and national bodies, such as things like Catapult, HMV, those people who have also used the technology and applied their own understanding and their own learning. And the findings and the use cases that they're sharing do show that you can get significant reduction in energy and significant improvements in efficiency with the kind of telemetry that the devices produce. Now, obviously, simply installing IoT and getting the data is not going to do anything. It's an absolute waste of time and money if all you're going to do is look at the data and go, great. You need to act on it, you need to understand it, you need to interpret it, and then you need to, I guess, use that as the basis for developing your strategy. So, there's a number of different parts that are required once that tech is in place, and it requires other systems and other services in order to turn that data into actual business intelligence. But the people we're seeing having the most success are those that are embracing that and recognizing that it can drive value for them, and that they're open to learning things both in the short term with initial cost reduction, cost savings and energy reduction, and in the longer term as well. Condition monitoring, preventative maintenance probably being the key drivers there, but people are obviously seeing the sort of medium to longer term benefits of that ongoing monitoring and trying to maximize the value that kind of solution offers.
Right. Right. So walk us through how Pressac addresses these challenges. What makes your approach unique?
I think from our side, the unique sort of elements that Pressac bring are probably sort of two or threefold. The first one is all of our products are made in the UK. We manufacture everything from the circuit board up in Nottingham. Many alternative products are obviously manufactured out in China and various places, where, or whether it's justified or not, some companies and end users with a very strong security position are maybe reluctant to use that kind of technology, especially because it often hangs on the client's network. So being manufactured and made in the UK is, we feel, a very, very strong point for us. The second is the role we feel we play. So we underpin solution offering. The data has to go into something like a software platform. It has to go into a platform that visualizes it and allows people to understand it and interpret it. We don't offer anything like that. Our limit of responsibility is at the point that our physical architecture hands the data off into someone else's world. So we don't overlap. We don't compete with our clients who by offering, say, software, for example. So there's a very clear delineation between where we stop and where other people start.
Right.
And we find that makes us very attractive to software providers, platform providers, consultants who can take the data that we offer in in an unprocessed format, and they can do all the clever stuff. They can do the modeling, the aggregation, and all the manipulation of it, and they can make use of that data from a raw format and turn it into something exactly what they want. They're not, there's no boundaries or limits to how they can manipulate it because the data is handed across. What that also means from our side is we don't have any ongoing charges for the provision of that. There is if I put my software hat back on, what I would want to do is retain all of that data, store the data within my own environment, and become basically the sort of the data owner, and license that data out and license access to it through APIs and things, and become necessary through the retention of the data and allowing people to access it. Pressac's role is that we don't want to own the data. We want the data to be valuable in its own right, but we hand that straight off, which means obviously from a commercial model, having a capital only solution is again something that's very attractive. And I guess that also leads on to the the technology partner approach, where although yes, we are a manufacturer, we want to operate more as a technology partner and support the initiatives that our clients have got, and work with them to help develop ultimately better value for the end client through the development and ongoing sort of enhancement of the products and solutions, sharing use case information, sharing examples of how people have made use of it, so that the platform providers and the consultants realize that the technology is able to do more than maybe just the top level description suggests, and how people are able to sort of exploit it and get additional value
Okay.
down the chain.
Okay, and around about that, how does the data collection process work, and what kind of insights can business gain from this data?
Well, I guess there's many insights from our side. We use the Notion messaging protocol. So all of our sensors talk back to a gateway or some form of backhaul network, using the Notion protocol, and then that's handed across into some software platform or some third-party application that's able to take that data and turn it into something that's usable.
Okay.
From an insights perspective, it's I guess it's so broad as to the benefits that people can get, but thinking on the energy efficiency side, obviously, which is what we're looking at, what we're focusing on here, is you can get data typically from a smart meter, as an
Yeah.
example, and usually, and obviously there's always exceptions to rules, but usually that smart meter data is provided on a half hourly basis, and it's made available every 24 hours. So you get the ability to look at what happened retrospectively, and you get a resolution that's quite low. The ability to see the consumption maybe on a half hourly basis gives you a vague insight into what's going on.
Hmm.
We have a number of devices which allow the telemetry to be provided to a very high degree of level in near real time, on a 30-second basis. So all of a sudden you can get much more significant insight into how something's working. So if you use the technology in a manufacturing environment, as an example, we do, a lot of our clients do this, you can see when a piece of equipment is turned on, when it's operational, when it's in standby mode, when it's non-operational. You can correlate the energy consumption and match it against the manufactured output and the
Yeah.
type of devices being manufactured. You can see what the energy consumption is per manufactured widget. You can often see when equipment's on, how long it takes to reach an operational capability, and then obviously compare the operational capability to when manufacture actually starts. So once you've got this level of understanding, it's very easy, certainly in the initial stages, to look at things such as, should the machine be on? Should the piece of equipment be on?
Yeah.
Has it been turned on too early, or has it been turned off too late? Should it have been put into standby mode or turned off if the operator's absent for a period of time? Typical culprits are machines being left on overnight, or left in standby overnight, or over the weekend. So generally people can identify areas of improvement really quite quickly to start with. Once those initial efficiencies have been implemented, that is usually enough to deliver ROI on the investment necessary for that solution. So
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of ROI justification sort of happening in months, once people have understood what the data is able to tell them. For the sort of medium and longer term, if you've got a library of data, for example, of what normal machine operation looks like from a power consumption profile,
Yeah.
and you can identify that on a typical production run, the energy consumption profile of machine X looks like this,
Hmm.
and there's obviously a mapped profile. What the software partners that we've got are able to do is to do anomaly detection.
Yeah.
People do confuse it with AI. It's not AI. It's anomaly detection, where if you expect a power consumption profile to match a certain sort of consumption, and it deviates from that, then that's a suggestion, obviously, that something different's happened. Now, through basic rules, what you can do is you can then alert someone to go and investigate. And we've had some documented success with a number of our clients, where through detection of unexpected power consumption, they've been able to intervene and do a lot of preventative maintenance activities, which is obviously supporting assisted production. As well, also from a conditional monitoring side, you can rebalance load on equipment and plant. You can offset. You can accelerate or decelerate service intervals. You can do all sorts of different things once you understand what's going on. So the ability to see what's going on and then obviously influence it and manage it allows people to obviously generate ongoing ROI and sort of the non-tangible benefits beyond simple bottom line reduction of energy consumption in the first place.
Right. And for example, you mentioned is when you talk to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
Normally, people think that they can come to Pressac and get a complete solution, which isn't possible directly from us. There's generally four things that are needed in order to start to deliver value from any intelligent workplace system. Is first thing is you need the data. So you need the IoT technology, you need the telemetry, either through introducing new sensor devices or making use of sensor devices that are already in place. A lot of machine
Right.
and equipment already reports back on what it's doing. So you'd recommend doing a gap analysis of what data have you got and what data do you need, and obviously then using IoT to fill those gaps in. So first is generating the data. The second is obviously the installation and sort of configuring of the additional tech that's needed, making sure it's put in the right place. And it's not put in areas where it's not going to be valuable. The temptation could be to deploy, 100 sensors when 20 would do, for example. So knowing what to put where to supplement your initial data set. The second then is, the third item then is some form of platform or some form of visualization tool to take the raw data that's generated and turn it into something that actually makes sense, to turn it into information, to model it out and to map it out and to display it in a way that's relevant and appropriate. And then the fourth item is someone to actually explain what it means and to look at the data and the visualization and be able to interpret it and know what it's telling them.
Yeah.
It's easy to display, bars on a chart, lines on a graph. It's easy to visualize and draw some really amazing sort of UI. But if you can't interpret what it's telling you and actually sort of learn and develop strategy from it, again, it's pointless. You need those four things. Sometimes when people see that, we get approached by end clients and think, I want to save energy, I need to buy your devices. Well, you don't. You might need our devices as part of that, but you need many other things as well. So
Right. Right.
from Pressac's perspective, we'll stand back and we'll offer people, or we'll offer to introduce people to companies that we have a close relationship with, depending upon what the end client actually wants to do. So if they just want to do maybe energy visualization, for example, and understand their energy consumption, then we can introduce them to partner A. If they want to take a number of disparate data sources and do some sort of complex modeling, so they want to compare energy consumption with environmental profile and occupancy and do, and correlate those different data sets really to get a really good understanding of their workplace sort of management system, then they might need a different system. If they want to take the information and they're very industrial or manufacturing and they want to take that along with other industrial IoT sort of for systems, then they will need partner A. If they want a digital twin, they'll need someone else. So there's a number of different platforms out there. There isn't anybody that does everything. So when we have those conversations with people sort of early on in the relationship, what we try and do, certainly from our side, is to understand where they want to go, both where they are at the moment and what they're looking to achieve, but where they feel that it might take them.
Yeah.
Then we can introduce them to people who, or to companies that have got the capabilities to help them along their journey in the longer term. Again, if people buy our technology, we don't benefit from having contracted subscription or subscription rates over X number of years. We get value out of repeat business. So we've got to sell them something that actually delivers value. So they want to come back and they want to buy more.
Right.
So we can't sort of sell and forget. It's that repeat, making sure people get value. So we're not afraid to challenge thinking. We're not afraid to suggest to people that they've misunderstood really what they could achieve, and we'll suggest a better way to do something, because we know that ultimately that approach pays off, because they'll be able to deliver derive the value,
Yeah, right.
and in return.
Yeah. Also, could you share a specific success story of a client who saw significant results using your solution?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that we've got and we publicise quite heavily. I guess the biggest one, or the most talked about one from our side, is Toyota Manufacturing. They've been clients of ours for a long, long time. They use their own internal software platforms and systems, but they started out using the energy monitoring capabilities that we provide, and we're able to deploy at a relatively high level initially, at a circuit level, to see what circuits were consuming energy, and when and how. And obviously that allowed them then to target in on certain areas of known energy inefficiency. What they've done over the years is layer more and more technology in over time. So
Yeah.
they started at obviously they looked at the incoming at the meter readings, then they looked at the individual circuits, they identified certain circuits that were high energy users. They looked at what equipment and plant was connected to those circuits, and then measured those equipment and plant levels individually, so that they could then understand obviously plant specific consumption and how that correlated to manufactured output. Then they started looking at component level consumption. So maybe, machines that are on standby, how much energy they're using, do all of the components within that machine need something? So they've gone to a huge level, and obviously addressed all their scope 1 emissions, looking at scope 2. Now they're encouraging all their sort of tier 1 suppliers, as part of their scope 3 activities, to look and try and adopt a similar process. And we've got other users and other clients that have done similar, where they're suggesting that using our technology as part of the services they offer, another, as part of a system, it's not unreasonable to maybe be able to reduce your energy consumption overall by upwards of 20%. In some cases, they're citing examples where they've been able to reduce consumption in a particular area zone of maybe upwards of 70%, which, when you obviously do the maths against that based on energy charges, it's quite an easy business model to propose, which I guess brings us back to the point of the question you asked earlier about the challenges that we face. Is you could present the arguments to somebody, but it's getting that initial, maybe an internal champion, to take that first step in committing some resource and committing some investment into putting this type of technology, and then realizing what they get out of it.
Yeah, great. Interesting case study, honestly.
Mm.
And looking at the broader industry, what key trends are you seeing emerge?
So I think that the main thing is people want to understand why they're paying what they're paying. And again, from an energy perspective, there's a number of initiatives that people have got, and there's obviously legislation coming through, which means people have to operate in a particular way. It's not always energy led when people think about their environment and what they want to measure and monitor. If you think about more commercial office space, people are finding themselves with quite a large amount of real estate. Now there's the sort of return to work strategies that people have adopted. The spaces that they had pre-COVID are much emptier than they are than they were. Often people aren't able to get rid of that real estate either. They maybe signed long leases and all sorts. So what they've got to do, they've got to optimize the experience for people going into that space, and that can be done by a number of different ways. But the first thing that they've got to do is they've got to understand who's in the space and when. So then they look at occupancy based IoT to understand who's using the building and when they're using it. Typically then, once they've understood that, they look at the environmental profile, because obviously the environmental comfort is a key factor in influencing occupation and behavior within that space. So they measure air quality, they measure temperature, humidity, and CO2 levels. They do all of those great things to understand, are they providing a well illuminated, well ventilated space that's comfortable for people, so that they encourage them to go into the office and make use of the very expensive real estate they've got.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that obviously then leads very nicely onto the energy side of things, because HVAC is obviously one of the biggest users in commercial real estate of energy. And if they're providing a well ventilated, well lit space that's, nice and temperate and has all these great things going for it, but there's no one in it, then they're spending money. They're spending, a lot of their resources on using energy to do so. So you can then start to look at correlating the environmental profile of a space against the occupancy levels and the energy consumption. And those sort of 3 points of the triangle allow someone to get a really, really good insight into their building operation. That can then be matched against typical sort of IWS or BMS systems, which tell you what should be going on. Obviously, you match that again against what is going on. And if you can have a platform or some form of integration between the two, your building starts to become effectively an intelligent building which can react to what's going on. So you're
Yeah, right.
making sure it's optimized and it's operating in the most efficient way based on all the different input triggers that you've got. Is it raining? Is it busy? Is it windy? Is it winter? Is it half term? All those different things that influence and affect the occupancy profile and how people are using the space. Is it a Friday afternoon? There'll be nobody there. So the building should start to shut down. Or if people have got booking systems that are in place, when they reserve a desk or they reserve a meeting room, if there's some form of intelligence that will effectively leave certain floors in standby, and you can fill the building up in an intelligent, considered way and have the BMS manage the environment accordingly, then you're able to realize the benefits in the most practical way possible. And again, from property owners and property managers, it helps support the credentials of a building if you go for BREEAM or Reset or any of these accreditations which support rent charges, lease charges, or initiatives and things. There's a whole series of reasons why people would be able to benefit from it, but then you bring it all the way back. They can't do any of that if they don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
So they
right.
need that constant source of information and constant source of intelligent data to act all of these
Yeah,
strategies and to implement all of these sort of behavior models and things that they've got. So, and that's where we come in. We underpin the whole thing.
yeah, makes sense, makes sense. And how are these trends affecting how business operate in your space?
I think people are realizing that it's necessary. It's one of the things that you can derive value from. Bigger players have a more identified need. They've got these skills internally, and they can promote and encourage. Smaller businesses recognize that maybe they might need to, but are unsure where to go. So, there's so much opportunity out there. I think there's no danger of people not finding um, opportunities to support. And obviously, the world's a very, very big place, and everywhere's got different levels of thinking and different approaches. And some countries are far more advanced in their thinking in certain areas compared to others. So it's very difficult to try and come up with, I guess, with a blanket description. We are seeing that people who invest their time and effort, not even necessarily money, but invest their time and effort in understanding what they need to do and how they can achieve it, are able to realize some really quite significant benefits to their businesses.
Right, right. So, where do you see the future of renewable energy monitoring and optimization heading?
Like as I said, there is a point at which you can't become more efficient. You can operate in an optimized way, and you know the additional benefits, the additional savings you get won't support the investment in additional technology, because there'll be a point where you saturate it. It's sort of like the 80-20 rule. And that's where obviously we're looking at, well, once you've got those systems in place and you've made those initial efficiencies, where do you go? What else can you do? And that's obviously where the on long-term monitoring, preventative condition monitoring comes in, the ability to realize that. But then, and this is, I guess, where, AI is starting to play a role, is with AI, you can start to then look at the big data sets and all the LLMs for comparable deployed tech on a bigger scale, and start to identify trends that allow you to become a little bit clever and a little bit more probably invested in the preventative side of things. Just because you've got 2 or 3 pieces of equipment that are the same make and model, they will have a varying energy profile. But if you can compare that with 400 or 500 or 4,000 or 5,000 different devices globally that are operating in a similar way, and the system is able to determine that a particular energy profile activity resulted in maybe a failure or an improvement or did something, then again that's where AI can really come into its own. It can take all the data that we've got coming in and start to generate proper models that people can really benefit from, because AI is only as good as the data sets that it is used. And if you fix a finite data set, then you will only ultimately have a number of permutations that system can generate. If we're able to feed it constantly with new information and new outputs and new actionable insights that people are able to show what it meant, and that's where the human element has to come in. AI learns from that. AI can then do the heavy lifting and the ongoing optimization, and only then raise anomalies or unusual outcomes to the person for that intervention and then learn from it. So you ultimately can get a really clever system, and that's where I think we're seeing a lot of the software partners that we work with investing their efforts in developing the systems that can start to be clever. So then if you think back to saying that you've got to be able to, you take the data, you've got to visualize it, you've got to know where to put it, you've got to understand it. The understanding it part starts to become something the software platforms are able to deliver. And then the intelligence part, the human part, can sit back and then think about where else it's going to go. And they can go to like the version 2 system and explore how to drive additional benefits and additional values. So that's really exciting from our side, and that we're part of that. We're a necessary part of it. It might be a very thin layer right at the bottom, but you can't do it without us. And that's a really good place to be.
Right. So what do you think most business owners are getting wrong when they're trying to address this specific problem?
I don't think it's necessarily they're getting anything wrong. I think it is an area that you need to understand. A lot of business owners obviously are very familiar with the products they make and how they manufacture things and the operational side of their own products, and they will know that absolutely inside out, back to front, upside down. When you look at the energy consumption, there is sometimes a tendency to think, well, it's always been like that, so it always will be like that. Having someone or maybe an external consultant be commissioned to go in, obviously, there is a need to act, and obviously that need to act has to have a trigger. And if that trigger isn't big enough or strong enough, then people are often reluctant to do it. It could be, and we saw this, obviously energy bills went up massively, because of the various global crises that were going on. Energy went through the roof. So everyone was like, oh my God, I've got to do something. That was the trigger. At the moment, there isn't any robust enough legislation that means people have to act. If they have a particularly high carbon footprint, or the carbon consumption is particularly high, or their output is high, it's a little bit so what at the moment. People show that they've got green initiatives for investment raising and funding and all those kind of things, but there isn't really the consequences if they don't. And again, I think until those triggers become strong enough, people will do it if they feel that there's a benefit or a necessity to do it. And I think that's probably one of the main things we'll see. It'd be like GDPR all over again. Until people had to do it, they didn't really take it seriously. And then when fines started being levied and people started getting taken to court and all sorts, all of a sudden it became serious, and everybody did. And I think that's possibly going to be what happens a bit more with energy as well. The prices will come down as the global situation stabilizes, and then it's what's going to be needed then, and it will come back to the environmental management and the carbon.
Right. So as we wrap up, what's next for Pressac? Any exciting developments on the horizon?
Yeah, we're always looking to think about what's next. Again, as part of an ecosystem, what we want to do is allow sort of that future-proof and that scalability. So if you deploy some of our tech in one of the certain areas, what we're obviously looking to do is, make it easy for people to layer additional technology and to get benefits. So we've got energy monitoring, we've got environmental monitoring, we've got occupancy monitoring, we've got things like leak detectors, we've got all sorts of devices. It's all about making people realize that they can drive additional value out of that. So we're looking at what can our sensors do? How can we make them work better? How can we make it easier to work with the sensors? Do we share, sharing use cases about what people have managed to do and how they've managed to make use of them to drive value? Because obviously what we want the data to become valuable to people. And if people can take one parameter, but make 4 or 5 use cases out of it, then it becomes infinitely better for people to do. So we're always looking at, how can we help people? What can we do? Is there a new technology? Can we detect something? Can we sense something? Can we qualify something in a particular way to support that that
Yeah,
intelligent workplace?
right. And for listeners who want to learn more or potentially work with Pressac, what's the best way to get in touch?
The best way would be to, I guess, fill in the contact us form on our website. You can then, you can give us a shout. You can send us an email. Generally, what we'll do is, we call it, say, have a discovery call, understand what they want to achieve. What does success look like for them? It's not a sales pitch. It's not a, buy our sensors because. It's, what needs to happen for them to consider that their problem has been solved. And through that discovery process, we'll work with them to help them understand, what's necessary. And if that means that they need data through the use of IoT, brilliant. That's where obviously we come in. If it means that they need to go and investigate in a different or an alternative way, again, the outcome will help them progress their journey. And what we'd hope that if they don't need anything now, as they develop their understanding, they remember Pressac, and that when they reach the point where technology is going to become required or is going to become necessary, that they come back to us and appreciate the help and assistance we gave them.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Great to see here. Thank you for sharing these insights about you, about your company, and about the whole story. And thank you for this amazing podcast session.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So, see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks, Alexander.